What is up, historians? Today we're going to do part 1 for the Unit 5 review, 1844 to 1877, 13% of the APUSH exam. Now, overview this unit, we're going from the Mexican-American War all the way to the end of Reconstruction, so we're looking at rising sectionalism and territorial expansion as we go through here. Then we have Lincoln getting elected, which is going to cause some southern states to secede. We'll have a civil war, lots of fighting. The war will end, we'll have Reconstruction over a period of years, and then we will end with troops pulling out of the South. Starting off with periodization, this unit starts 1844. Again, this is the Mexican-American War, so we're starting off with all this new territory the United States is going to gain and what they're going to do about the issue of slavery as they head west. This unit will end in 1877, the end of Reconstruction. This happens with the Compromise of 1877, which you should know. President Hayes is going to get the presidency in a deal with Congress, and he agrees to remove the troops from the South, right? He's a Republican, so he's supported by the North, but he gets elected because he says, I will remove troops from the South, which marks our end of Reconstruction. Now, politics and political parties. We are starting off with Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore. Both of these guys are Whigs, right? This is our second two-party system between the Whigs and the Democrats. We'll have a couple other Democratic presidents. And then we get into our third and final two-party system between Democrats and Republicans with the election of Abraham Lincoln. Now, this election in 1890 is going to be the reason that the South secedes, because they're going to see Lincoln as only supporting the North, ignoring the needs of the South, and so they're going to want to leave the Union. And Lincoln is definitely against the spread of slavery publicly. Privately, he's against slavery altogether, and so the South does not like that. Now, this is going to cause the Civil War. Like I said, Abraham Lincoln is the Civil War president. He's the one who passes the Emancipation Proclamation, which is like an executive order to free all the slaves. He will be in charge of Reconstruction for a little bit of time, but he will be assassinated right after the Civil War, so he won't get to see what his whole presidency accomplished, right? Because he's killed before he can see it. Now, our next president is going to switch gears from a Republican to a Democrat, so a Southern guy, Andrew Johnson, okay? One of my least favorite presidents of all time. Now, the reason he's my least favorite is he's going to undo essentially everything Lincoln had fought for in the Civil War. He's very unpopular in Congress. In fact, he will get impeached because he's trying to remove those Republican officials that Abraham Lincoln had appointed, and Congress is going to say, hey, that's an abuse of your power, and they're going to try to impeach him. It doesn't go through, no impeachment has, but he is one of our first impeached presidents there. He's also going to veto things like the Civil Rights Act, which was to give additional rights to blacks in the South, and another early veto in our history. He's going to veto that act, and Congress is going to override his veto, meaning they got a 2/3 majority there and overrid his veto. He's also going to be in charge of Reconstruction. We'll talk about what his Reconstruction looks like. He does not do a good job of it. Essentially, he allows black codes to get passed. He allows blacks to get put back into basically slavery 2.0, but again, we'll look at that later. And then after Johnson, we get Ulysses S. Grant, a former Union general, very interesting character, this guy, back to a Republican. And he's going to do what's called radical Reconstruction, which is when we have troops in the South enforcing Reconstruction laws. So we have Abraham Lincoln, freed the slaves, great guy. Johnson, kind of an a-hole. And then Grant, another good guy. Next up, we have foreign policy and wars. Let's start off with the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty of 1850. This is an agreement between the United States and Britain, and what they say is we will both remain neutral in South America. Neither of us are going to try to get new colonies down here. We're going to kind of leave South America alone. Kind of a continuation of that Monroe Doctrine, if you remember from the last unit. Now, Britain, much to the anger of the United States, is not really going to do this. They're going to continue expanding power in South America, so this treaty doesn't work out too well, but it's important to know that the U.S. is trying to play nice with Britain here. They also, in this treaty, discuss building a canal in South America so they don't have to go, or Central America, so they don't have to go all the way around South America. They propose to build it in Nicaragua. Obviously, this thing will eventually be built in Panama, but there you go. And like I said, it's not effective, this treaty. We also have Matthew Perry and his expedition to Japan a little bit before the Civil War here. This is a Japanese depiction of Matthew Perry and his steamship chugging into a Japanese harbor. Now, at this time, Japan had been closed off for hundreds of years, so Matthew Perry's in a steamship with guns and cannons, and the Japanese are on the shore with essentially spears and kind of rudimentary guns and things like that. Like, think about modern military versus a medieval military. And America will, in quotes, open Japan. Japan was already trading with Asia, but they're going to open Japan to the west. So again, this is kind of a boost to American military and nationalism. Now, obviously, we got to hit the Civil War, right? That's kind of the key of this unit. Now, the South, like we said, is going to secede with South Carolina first, and then all these other states joining in and seceding away from the Union, forming the new Confederacy of states independent from the United States. They're led by Jefferson Davis, who's going to become the president of the Confederate States, but they do have the goal of keeping the North out. All they want to do is remain independent, which should give them an upper hand, but they also have a lower population and they have lower industry, okay? So it's harder to fight a war with less people and less guns. Now, the North, they want to get the South back, right? Abraham Lincoln wants to get these southern states back into the United States. In order to do that, he has the Anaconda Plan, where they're going to go blockade the Mississippi River. They're going to do a naval blockade in the ocean here, and they're going to cut the South in half and then kind of divide and conquer and choke them out, make sure they don't get any supplies. Some important things to note: we have General Sherman is going to do a march to the sea in 1864. This is a good instance of total war, okay? So he's going to start pushing all the way out through the South to the ocean, dividing the South once again. As Sherman pushes, he's a Northern general, as he pushes down south, he's going to be killing women and children, burning whole entire towns. So we really see that total war aspect of the Civil War. Very, very brutal campaign. But again, it works, and the South is split into now 3 sections, which is easier to conquer. We also have the Emancipation Proclamation, which frees the slaves, ends slavery. Now, Lincoln is against slavery, but he has a other motive here. He hopes that slaves in the South will rebel against their masters. They'll flee up to the North and join the Union cause. And a lot of slaves, or free slaves, do that because of this Emancipation Proclamation. So very effective there. Good strategy for winning the war. Some battles to note. Really early in the war, we have the Battle of Bull Run, which is a very successful battle for the South. They win pretty handily. The North underestimated the South quite a bit early on, and it gives the South a lot of confidence. We also have the Battle of Gettysburg later in the war, 63. That is a Union victory, not a unit victory. Sorry about that. One of the bloodiest wars in history up to that point. We also have the Gettysburg Address, okay, where Lincoln goes out on the field after the battle and tells Americans, specifically the North, that we need to rally together to fight against the South and reunify America. Very famous piece of, a very famous speech there in American history. Now, obviously, the North is eventually going to win, and all these states will be pulled back into America, and that is when we get Reconstruction after the Civil War. Reconstruction Acts, I put this in foreign policy, which I know is kind of strange, but it is kind of a foreign policy because we're dealing with the South, who is just a foreign country, right? Now we're pulling them back in. And so we have this Reconstruction Act of 1867, which begins the concept of radical reconstruction. So under Johnson, Reconstruction wasn't all that effective. Under Grant, it's going to be much more effective because he is going to put military troops on the ground, Union troops on the ground in the South, and he's going to force Southerners to follow Reconstruction laws, which is pretty excellent, okay? Under Radical Reconstruction, we even see blacks getting elected into Southerners. Black people are voting. It's a very progressive period under Radical Reconstruction. But, of course, after Grant's presidency is over, all those troops leave, and the South is going to get into Jim Crow and things like that, which we'll talk about in a second here as well. So what do we got going on economically in Unit 5, Period 5? Well, pre-war, we see the North's economy develop very much into an industrial economy. Take a look at this map here real quick, and you look at this little factory deal here. These are all manufacturing centers. This is textiles, this red stuff, and you can see the South, or the North rather, has the mass majority of industry, and that's really being fueled by immigrants coming in from mostly Ireland. Okay, so the North is based on industry, and immigrants are their labor. Now the South is plantation economy. Take a look up here. You can see green is cotton, and the South has the mass majority of cotton, well, actually all the cotton plantations here. So they have a plantation-style economy with slavery as its focus. In the West, we get cash crops. Okay, so all this kind of beige stuff is cotton or corn and wheat. So the West is very much focused on cash crops and farming. As they farm this western land, they are going to be destroying the environment. In class, we talked about how putting up fences, getting rid of the grasslands, killing all the buffalo, things like that is going to destroy the environment out here, and much to the chagrin of the natives who live out here and rely on that environment. But it's very, very brutal at this time. We also get boom towns and ghost towns out in the West. I don't have Nevada up here, but there is a place in Nevada. The Comstock Lode in 1859 is a silver mine that is found, and they build this huge Virginia city to mine that silver, and as soon as the silver's out, they all leave, and it becomes a ghost town. And as you guys know, living in California, we have a ton of ghost towns that were once boom towns. So that is happening in the West. We also get a hint of the Gilded Age here early on with Andrew Carnegie and his steel company, which is a rising monopoly in America. So we see hints of that Gilded Age creeping in here, even in this unit. We also get hints of progressivism and popularism. Again, these are political and social movements as well, but they can fit an economy because it's about farmers out west getting angry about the monopoly in the railroads, charging them high prices to ship that grain. So they're basically making no money. So they form this organization, the Grange, in order to get better prices for their crops. We also get the Greenback Party at this time, which is an anti-monopoly platform. So you can see with these two bullet points the rise of this Gilded Age, the rise of monopolies and low regulation in the economy. as for expansion, the U.S., this unit is really where the U.S. expands out quite a bit, okay? And the way they're going to fill all this new territory they got from the Louisiana Purchase, the Mexican-American War, all that stuff, annexation of Texas, they're going to pass the Homestead Act, okay? And this is, if you're an individual, you can get 100 acres of land for cheap. And the drawback, I guess, the catch, is you have to stay there for 5 years, okay? So the government is basically giving away land out here in the West to settlers in order to fill it up so that we don't have Russia up here sneaking in, or Britain up here sneaking in, or Mexico taking territory, right? So we want to fill this land up so that we can make them states and we can establish America coast to coast. We also have things like the Morrill Land Grant Act in 1862, which is going to give land and money for colleges to be built kind of over here in these territories. And the goal there is, again, to get not just farmers out there, but to get some educated people out there and get some industry established. Now, to get all these homesteaders out west, they are also going to pass the Pacific Railway Act, which is land for rail companies, okay? So they're going to give vast swaths of land across America to these rail companies in order to build their railways across America. And this is how we're going to get these kind of monopolies, is because the rail companies can build for so cheap, and the government's footing the bill, and so they can form these massive companies that control all the railways. Now, as we expand, pre-war, slavery is going to be the issue for these new territories. Do these new states enter as slave states? Do they enter as free states? What is that going to do to the balance in Congress between free and slave congressmen? That is the main issue, and we'll touch on that in a second here. We also get Alaska Purchase, 1867. Andrew Johnson, maybe the only good thing he ever did, was buy Alaska from the Russians, okay? The Russians need the money, they're fighting wars, so they got to sell that land. Now, this isn't like when Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase without congressional approval. Johnson is merely signing the paper while Congress makes the deal, so he follows the proper operation of orders there. Now we're also going to get the first transcontinental railroad in 1869. It's going to meet over here in Utah, right? So it's built from Sacramento to Utah and then out and connects to all these railroads that are already established in the West. So that is an important development as well. Now that's the end of part 1 for Unit 5. I will post part 2 soon, where we'll cover Native Americans, African Americans, women, all that stuff. So take it easy, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy.